Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa.
Promise you joy in the mystery.
Dr. Marissa, also known as the Asian Oprah. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate to live, laugh, love, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pei.
Had to get a little more applause there. And good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Marissa reporting live from my living room. You're listening to Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced, get happy with Dr. Marissa. My 470th consecutive week on the air, on camera, with this show that is about hope and happiness. So there's no gossip, no scandal, and I used to say no K words, no Kardashian talk, but Kim Kardashian is actually doing some great things on the planet, so I can't say that anymore. But nevertheless, this is a show for you, and I appreciate all the support in this past. I'm coming up on 9 years, and I want to highlight not the things that are wrong with our planet, not the things that are wrong with us, but the good things, people who are doing things to help make this planet a better place. And with all of the things that have been going on, you know that there's a lot wrong. So instead of ranting about them and raving about them and shock talking, you know, I'm your hashtag positively opinionated host, and I love bringing guests who can talk about solution. So if you've missed any of my past shows, Fran Drescher coming to talk about how to reduce your risk of cancer, as well as just a plethora of folks. And we've been doing special series. So if you're tuning in right now, you're at my pre-record, feel free to make comments. If you're listening to this on my KFI station, my CNBC, NBC News radio channel, that leaves no listener behind. Just tune in every Friday at 3, drive time, prime time, AM 1050, FM 102.3, and FM 106.5. So today, who do I have today? And let me give her a proper introduction because it's quite impressive. Connie Chung Jo is the Chief Executive Officer of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, LA, the nation's largest legal and civil rights organization for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Prior to joining Advancing Justice LA in August 2020, Connie served as the executive director of the Korean American Family Services for 11 years. Under Connie's leadership, KFAM nearly quadrupled its budget and staff with culturally and linguistically responsive services to immigrant families, particularly those struggling with mental health, domestic family violence, and acculturation. We're going to talk about that, stresses. Prior to joining KFAM, Connie was a public interest lawyer for 7 years. Please welcome to my show, back to my show, Connie Chung Jo. Welcome, Connie. I'm so glad. I get you in a bigger box this time. Last time you were here, you were on a panel.
That's right. Thank you so much, Dr. Marissa, for having me back.
Of course. And I really wanted us to up-level what we're already talking about. In fact, you're my representative for graduate school. So I did a series on It's Not Black and White, or Is It? After George Floyd's murder, with Akuyo Graham, who's a beautiful actress and activist. And we did a special series on that. And then in response to Asian American hate crime and Stop AAPI Hate, I brought you on a panel with other community leaders. I also had Shay's son. And what's come up is this whole people of color helping people of color. So I thought it was important enough to highlight, because I'm also hearing the other side. And it's interesting, yesterday I attended, one of my clients did a fireside chat with Dion, who is the TV anchor up in Northern California who covers almost all of the Asian hate crime. And she, we had questions in the chat, and some of them were saying, what about, why is it that Black Americans seem to be the perpetrators of a lot of the Asian American crime? And she didn't put that question up because it wasn't the time or place to address it. But I know it's one of those, let's put the moose on the table, which is my Canadian version of talking about the elephant in the room. So when I mentioned that to you, I loved your response. And so that's why I brought you on, is let's talk about this. Why is it that there's a perception that people of color don't help people of color and hurt other people of color? And is it true that, I just got a call to go on location for another event, a memorial event from what they say may have started the Watts riots, which was the Korean store owner shooting an African-American teenager. So that's the end of my ramble. Please respond and just help me understand.
Sure. Well, so I would first like to dispel that misperception that what we're seeing today with the surge in anti-Asian hate is really a problem of Black perpetrators attacking Asian victims. I do think that has been the perception, and that's sort of the way, I have to say, it gets spun by the media or social media. But Stop AAPI Hate, which is the leading aggregator of data at this time around Asian violence, has said that only 10% of the perpetrators of the close to 4,000 reported cases they've received involve somebody who's Black or brown. So 10% is actually a very small minority. But I do think that is this misperception that people think, it's a Black problem and an Asian problem. And I would say, Dr. Marissa, that this is not the first time we've seen that. I think today is actually April 29th, which is the 29th anniversary of the LA riots.
Yeah.
And in the Korean community, we actually call it Saigu, and Sa means 4, Igu means 29. So it's actually for that date that we commemorate it. Mm-hmm. But that time as well, you might recall that the media really played it up, that this was a Black Korean problem. I agree. There has definitely been some racial tensions in the past, and that those issues are there. But I do feel that it makes for a nice, sexy story. And so sometimes it's been played up more than it needs to be.
Absolutely.
And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to cite the example of one of the most horrific Asian American crime video clips that went viral and was just all over the news, was the one in New York where the African-American guy, punched the woman, and then the people that were inside the glass doors closed the door on the whole, that was like all over the place. And so I understand how it could feed that perception, but I wanted to highlight your truth that it is a misperception because it's less than 10%. Why aren't they showing more of the white Americans who are perpetrating, which is the majority actually in Northern California, if I understand it? Mm-hmm. It's white Americans that are.
That's right. So. It is overwhelmingly white perpetrators. And I think it's really important. And what doesn't get uplifted enough is actually the allyship between the Black and the Asian community, and how important that solidarity is. When I think about the attention that is coming right now to the Asian community, where people, not just Asians, but mainstream society and media are finally saying what is happening to the Asian community is not okay, and we all stand in solidarity with you. I give direct credit to this moment, to the Black Lives Matter movement last year, where finally, it seemed like our country woke up and said, this issue of anti-Blackness and the over-criminalization of Blacks, particularly young Black men, it's an American problem. This is something we all should care about in our society. And that woke up, I think, our country to saying when another group is being oppressed, it's not just their problem, it is all of our problems. Because the thing is, when the pandemic first started last year, there was a spike in Asian hate crimes and incidents then too, but no one was talking about it.
Yes.
We actually couldn't get any attention on the subject.
Yes.
But it was after the Black Lives Matter movement and really the progress that the Black community and our society was able to make to acknowledge anti-Blackness that has paved the way for what is now a recognition that there is racism in our Asian community that needs to be stopped and that the violence needs to end.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I remember in June signing a change.org petition to try to get mainstream media to cover Asian American hate crimes. And it took a petition. Actually, unfortunately, it took the mass shooting in Atlanta to finally put us on the map. And then, thank goodness, the Stop AAPI people, have been tracking since the pandemic, since, the references to Kung flu and Chinese flu or Chinese virus, thanks to our former, that was, it's great, but it's sad that it took a mass shooting for that coverage to happen. Absolutely. So tell me what from your perspective, you're a lawyer, no lawyer jokes. And I think it's wonderful that you are doing what you're doing because you're a nonprofit. You are helping Asian Americans who are going through some kind of legal battle with somebody. So talk to me about how Asian cultures have led us to this place of, being called a model minority. Why, as you were just speaking to the African-American community with Black Lives Matter, in essence was helpful to help raise the voices of Asian Americans against hate crimes. So what about our culture makes it so challenging?
Yeah. So when you look at first that term model minority, that was coined in the 1960s by a white author of an article whose point was Asian Americans are so successful, they're so hardworking, they do well in school, and they go on to be professionals and make lots of money. They are the model minority, which at first glance sounds very positive. Thank you very much for all of those compliments.
Yes.
But then it goes on to say, so because Asians are being so successful as a minority, what's wrong with all of you, other communities of color, and particularly Black communities? Why can't you pick yourself up by your bootstraps the way the Asian community has? And so that model minority myth has actually been used as a tool to keep Asians wedged with other communities of color, and in doing so, keep communities of color down. And it has also been used by saying that Asians are doing so well as a way to make our needs invisible. So many people have been saying recently, where is this coming from? Asians have never been targeted before. I can't believe this is happening. In fact, Asians have been targeted in this country for hundreds of years, going back to the Chinese and the Chinese Exclusion Act, and Japanese Americans with World War II, and South Asians and Muslims during 9/11, Vincent Chin in 1982. I mean, the incidents go on and on. We just don't know that history, and that model minority myth obscures it. It obscures that, and it obscures actually the true needs of our community, which what the reality is that amongst any racial group in this country, Asians actually have the highest disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Income level, educational attainment, you name it. We have the most differences. And that has to do with our immigration patterns, right? Some of us came to this country because America was looking for professionals. So Koreans, Filipinos, Indian, South Asians, they were brought in and recruited to be doctors and engineers. And that's why you have sort of an overrepresentation of those kinds of professions from those ethnicities. It's not because all Asians are good at math, but America selectively picked people who are good at math to come to this country. When you look at other ethnic groups like Vietnamese, Cambodians, Hmong, Lao, they were brought here as refugees after Civil War. It is a very different prospect coming to this country as a refugee with nothing but the shirt on your back and having come through the trauma of a civil war than it is to come here under a professional license. So, of course, we're going to have a lot of disparities, and of course, we're going to have a lot of needs. But the model minority myth, it obscures that. Yeah. And then, Dr. Marissa, when you talk about the cultural difference, there are some Eastern cultural values that for some groups, Asians feel that we don't talk about our dirty laundry to outsiders. And when something is unpleasant, you keep that silence. And that's why it's sometimes hard for Asian Americans to access things like counseling services or domestic violence services. I always had a really hard time with getting getting community members to come forward for those types of things, because there are some cultural values with certain Eastern cultures that say, you don't talk about that kind of stuff. You keep those things quiet. Those unpleasant things, you keep it down.
Absolutely. There's a Chinese and a Japanese saying, the nail that stands up is hammered down. And I'm a constant source of embarrassment to my family because I talk on camera a lot, and that's not okay as well. And just want to give a shout out to Diane Kwan, who says this is a really essential topic to be talking about. So thank you, Diana. And if you've just tuned in and you're wondering who I have on my Loving Room platform today, you are tuned in to Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa. And that is Connie Chung, not Chung, but Connie Chung Jo. People have taken a triple take on that. And we're talking about graduate school, people of color and people of color. So we're talking about how we can end racism by working together, by first talking about and putting the moose on the table about what isn't working, what perceptions are not real, what the news, which is a weapon of mass distraction, a term from my big brother, Michael Bernard Beckwith, that has sort of led us to believe that it's a African-American versus Asian American issue, which it is not. So when we're talking, and today is the anniversary of the Watts riots, of the LA riots. I do know that when I do value and diversity work, one of the examples I use on why we get in trouble across cultures. Everybody wants respect. Everybody says do the golden rule. But when you define respect differently, you can get into conflict. And the example I use is a Korean store owner, in order to respect the customer, will take the change and put it on the counter instead of putting the change onto the person's hand. Now, that's respect from a Korean a cultural standpoint. But from an African American or Black American standpoint, if you don't put the change in my hand, the perception is that you don't respect me enough. What, you think I'm dirty? You put the change on the table instead of my hand. And so these are real cultural differences that are coming into conflict with a misinterpretation. So when we're talking about why can't we just get along, and talking about communication and respect across differences, we can all do a one step back and maybe adopt the platinum rule, which is instead of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, do unto others as they would like them to have done unto them, which is platinum, which is more expensive than gold. So that's my 8 cents worth on that. So the work that you're doing now, and what can we as Asian Americans do to better help end racism in working with other people of color?
Yeah. So first, we all need to shake this model minority myth ourselves. And there are still plenty of Asian Americans who like this idea of, I like to be associated with white people. I like to be seen as my culture being successful and we're smart. And so I'm going to do that. And we have to recognize, no, this is actually a tool that has kept our American structure that puts whites on top and everyone else on bottom, and it keeps that structure of white supremacy is what we call it. But you being second and then having other communities of color still means that you are put below, and we don't want to do that. What we want to do is all band together to try to flip that culture around so we are all equal. And so first, Asian Americans, don't buy into that model minority myth. And recognize that power comes when we're all working together as people of color to say none of us should be oppressed. None of us should be targeted. As Asian Americans, if we want people to care about our needs and what's happening to us, we got to pay it forward. We got to show we care about other people when they're targeted and racism happens. You know, I've heard so many Asian Americans, last year were saying, why don't people care what's happening to us? Why aren't people fighting and talking about anti-Asian violence? I agree, they should be caring. But then I also said, why aren't we all at Black Lives Matter movement and focusing on that, and also saying we're here for you because we think racism against any one of us is a racism against all of us. Yeah. So that is the kind of solidarity we need to show. We need to vocally say we support the Black community, we support Black Lives Matter movement, we support the Latinx community. This is a controversial one, Dr. Marissa, but I will say that the Asian American community is pretty split on the subject of affirmative action. Here in California, it's a lightning rod topic. And a lot of Asian Americans feel that if I support affirmative action, I'm bringing my community and Asian American communities down at for the benefit of Black, Latinx, and other communities of color.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is actually in California. There was just a proposition last year to try to get it passed, and some of the most vocal opposition to it came from the Asian American community.
Wow.
Yeah, and I would say that first, I think a lot of Asian Americans didn't realize that actually that law and the affirmative action policies would help a lot of Asian Americans because it would require government to, when it's bidding with small businesses for subcontracts, to take into account race, including Asian Americans in small businesses, which would actually help a lot of Asian small business be more competitive for government bids than they've been before. Similarly, with public jobs in government, they'd be able to be more competitive. But most Asian Americans were just thinking, oh, well, for school, my kid's not going to go to an Ivy League college or, well, in California, to UCLA or UC Berkeley because that spot's going to be given to another kid of a different racial group. I just don't think that's the way we need to think about it. We need to think that if there are more kids of color and students of color in these public institutions, that's better for all of us. Yes. Then they can band together. They can learn about diversity. They can learn about why communities of color have been challenged and what we need to do to work together. So that's one of those examples where I think Asian Americans have sometimes fallen prey to that model minority myth. And I would challenge us to kind of look at that a little deeper.
Right. Very important point. So I do understand also the other side of affirmative action, even for the minority person who's like, I am only being hired as a token number. It's not from my qualifications, or that's the perception that is thrown onto me. Oh, from people who are prejudiced, you're only getting this job because you're a token or a model minority or whatever, you're just a minority. And that whole backlash of reverse discrimination, this is so wrong, how this is not a numbers game, and now I can't become a fireman or I can't become an EMT because of this stupid, affirmative action and the numbers. And my response is always, well, tongue in cheek, is, wow, people of color have been in slavery. The country's built on slavery. The country's built on the backs of, Chinese Americans on the West Coast for the railroads, taking land from indigenous people. Like, we've gone through hundreds of years of discrimination, and you go through like less than 6 months of affirmative action and you're crying reverse discrimination. It's like, please. But I mean, there's really no other way, right, to level the playing field than to go through this exercise. Is there?
No, I agree. I think this is what we need to do to level the playing field. And we see it now, even private companies talking about it, when they're saying we want to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want to add women to our boards and top management positions and our C-suite positions. We want to add people of color to those positions. When we say we're going to add people of color or women into these C-suite positions, that means somebody who is not a person of color or not a woman is going to lose that seat. And it is, again, people crying, well, that's reverse discrimination. But the fact that, 90% of these Fortune 500 boards are just white men is a problem. And the only way to address it is to remove some of them and replace them with women and people of color. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that when that happens, it doesn't mean that woman or that person of color is unqualified for that position. It just means that we're recognizing that we have a structure that showed preference for certain qualities that were not having anything to do with celebrating our diversity or celebrating us as women or celebrating us as people of color. That corporate America was saying there are other qualities we think are more important. And by the way, those qualities always favored white men. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's finding people who are less deserving to be in those positions. It's reframing what is important for that position. Mm-hmm. And being a woman and coming with that knowledge of what it's like to live in a sexist society, or being a person of color and knowing what it's like to embrace the diversity of different cultures and races and ethnicities, that's a positive thing. And I think companies and institutions have to recognize that.
Yes, and I totally agree with you, but I'm going to also now put another huge moose on the table, which I probably am going to get into trouble for. But I woke up with this last week, and all of a sudden the connection and why there's so much anger and so much hatred and so much Capitol, what happened in Capitol Hill and all of this, making American great again, all of that, the QAnon, all of this stuff is a pushback against changing the face of America to a colorful America. I mean, bottom line, moose on the table. It's a push from a racist white, predominantly white America to wanting America to reflect the product of come all ye, to the land of opportunity. And so we did. And we're here, and we love our country. I came from Canada. I was one of the first groups that became American after 9/11. And wanting to have America reflect its diversity. And what we are seeing is this: no, we don't want that. we want America to be great and white as it used to be. Are you getting that? I mean, if I'm honest with what I hear, that's what I'm hearing. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think what's happening is white Americans who remember America from the past recall an America where it was a very white dominant society. And that was, I'm sure it was nice for white Americans to have that. They didn't have to deal with, wondering about other cultures and having to be sensitive to these other groups and having that kind of complication, right? Being a diverse society that we are and that we continue to grow to be makes life more complicated. And for the dominant group that was on top for so long to have that kind of pushback is hard.
Yeah.
Of course they're not going to like that. And we have to recognize that America by I think either 2040 or 2050 is going to be a majority minority country. That means more than half of this country is going to be people of color, people that look like you and me, who look Latino, who look Black. I mean, certain states like California are already there. And I think if you were coming from a culture where it was a white majority and you were used to having that and having the privilege that went with that, it's hard. It's hard to give that up. I recognize that. And I can understand why some white Americans want to retain that previous tradition and culture and why these changes are hard for them.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I want to balance it out before we go on a commercial break. I'm not talking about all white people. There's a large number of white Americans, not large. There is a portion that I'm hoping will get larger who embrace diversity. And those are my listeners. And those are the people who, really support Black Lives Matter, have said we support Asian Americans. We want to stop AAPI hate. So let me just qualify. When I say white Americans and white supremacy, I'm not talking about y'all. I'm talking about the ones that went to march on Capitol Hill and the ones that are supporting our former. So with that, before I get into more trouble, thank you for sponsoring this show. If you'd like to become a sponsor of this love-hearted, like-minded, take my advice, I'm not using it. We'll be right back in thanking OLAC, a wonderful sponsor with delicious food. We'll be back in 2 and 2. Peace in, peace out. World peace through inner peace.
Want delicious Vietnamese Asian fusion cuisine that is so good for your health you won't believe your taste buds? OLAC is a 100% plant-based vegan restaurant founded by Mai on living foods and a love for animals that won't make you sacrifice taste for health. 2 locations to delight you, downtown LA and Fountain Valley. So go to www.olac.com, AULAC, to book your reservation today. Saving the planet has never tasted so good.
And we're back. You're tuned into Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced, get happy with Dr. Marissa. Today is show number 470. So grateful to be continuing to splatter more hope and happiness on you. Please stay tuned for next week, which is celebrating my 9th year anniversary on air, on camera. And I will be unveiling my first short film called The New PPP Post-Pandemic Possibilities. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate 9 years with a hashtag COVID silver lining. Would have never had time or the creativity to actually make my first short film. But thanks to COVID and the new PPP, I was. So please do come back next week as we celebrate that on this KCAA AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, the station that leaves no listener behind, exclusive home to the Asian Oprah, Fridays at 3 Pacific Standard Time. And today we have a very special guest. She's here for the second time. She's really helping me understand this whole area of people of color, helping people of color, and how and why it hasn't been encouraged. And model minority, we talked about. If you missed that, just go ahead and the show will repeat on Saturdays at 6 as well. You can always free subscribe to my YouTube channel that houses all of my past shows, including those with Layla Ali or Corey Feldman or the cast of Happy Days. So Connie Chung Jo is a lawyer who is the CEO of Asian American Advancing Justice, LA. And I asked you what Asians can do to help this effort of Asians helping other people of color. What would you say to the other people of color on this platform? I have a large African American listening base who are asking me, what can I do to support you? So African American, as well as Latino American, as well as Native Americans, as well as white Americans. So what can other people of color do to support this next level of support for ending racism?
Well, Dr. Marissa, there are a couple things that allies can do to support the Asian community at this time. One is we're encouraging people to get bystander intervention training. That way you can learn how to safely intervene should you witness an act of harassment or hate in order to try to de-escalate it before it gets worse. I know when these incidents happen at that moment, people freeze up and they happen so quickly, but we've seen too many video footages of people being beaten on the streets or being harassed and folks just watching it and not doing anything about it. We, as Asian Americans, we want to live in a society where we feel safe, where we feel like we can actually walk down the street. I was just on a panel yesterday with an Asian American woman in New York City who said, I'm 8 months pregnant. I will not take the subway. I will not leave my house if I don't have to. I am so much more worried with the return to work about being attacked right now than I am about the COVID-19 virus itself. So what we need to know is that when we are out in public, people have our backs. They're looking out for us and there's safety in numbers. So if you're interested in bystander intervention training, Asian Americans Advancing Justice does offer it. You can check it out at our website, which is advancingjustice-la.org. We do it.
Ticker.
Thank you so much. And we're doing it with the curriculum developed by another nonprofit called Hollaback, and they go over what's called the 5 Ds. And I won't go over all the 5 Ds now, but for example, the first D, which is distract, means can you indirectly or sort of creatively create some sort of a situation that all of a sudden breaks that moment and might break that conversation. So you're walking down the street, you're at the park, and you hear somebody raising their voice at an Asian senior. When you walk by them, can you pretend to drop your coffee or you drop your change on the ground? Because then everyone's going to stop for a second and see what that disruption was. Mm-hmm. That sometimes is all you need to break that moment.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Give me another D.
So the next one is delegate. Can you find a person of authority and have them get involved? So if you're on the bus where we've heard a lot of Asian seniors being harassed, go up to the bus driver and say, hey, you need to pull over and check something out that's happening back here. So find somebody, whether it's a manager or a security guard, somebody in a position of authority to come help. That's delegate. Mm-hmm. So the first thing as an ally, take a bystander intervention training, learn what you can do to support the community. The second thing I would say is reach out to friends and colleagues and those in your social spheres who are Asian American and let them know that you are looking out for them and you're worried about them and you stand in solidarity with them. Mm-hmm. If you're not used to talking in terms of race, it can feel a little awkward at first doing that, but you do get better at it to say, hey, I just want to check in with you. I hope you're okay. What a terrible time this is for the attacks on the Asian community. And I just want you to know that I'm here for you, or I stand in solidarity with you. And once you get used to doing that, it doesn't get so hard. And I can tell you that for the recipient, for many Asian Americans, those kinds of comments right now from friends and loved ones mean a lot.
Mm-hmm. And let's put the moose on the table on that one as well. The reaching out sometimes, if the person is not receptive or is reacts to it. I know that some people will say, how do you feel as an Asian American about this? Or how do you feel as an Asian woman about this? And sometimes if I'm not in a good place, I'm like, you're asking me to comment on behalf of millions? I mean, I'm not, I'm not the spokesperson. Plus, it's on the heels of someone saying to me, you're really communicative, or I've always wanted to date an Asian woman. With that, I'm not going to cook for you. I'm not cleaning for you. I'm not going to walk on your back except with high heels on to hurt you. So I think what that is for speaking for myself and as a minority is I want to be seen as a multifaceted being. And so I want to be seen as a woman and all of the other things that I am. And I think everybody has that, which is why it makes diversity difficult to talk about. Even when you say you're an Asian woman, it's like, yes, but I'm unique in this way. Or you're an African-American male, what do you think about this? And it's like, well, I'm more than just a Black man. I have all of these other qualities. So I think for all of us, to take some care that your intent, I want to explore the Asian culture more with the impact, which might be, don't ask me about what good Chinese food is, because I'm way more than Chinese food, although I love Chinese food. My dad used to call me a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside, but my very center are the yellow C's, which is my appetite. So, but God bless him, he's on the other side. But so I think it's tricky to talk. Like you said, you're not comfortable reaching out to say, I stand with you. What are you talking about? That's not in fact, that's not part of me. If we can all get more comfortable about talking about our differences beyond the stereotype. Just because you don't want a stereotype doesn't mean that there isn't a plethora of wonder around the complexity in diversity. And that is not a bad thing. So I absolutely support that. But it is complex. It does take a skill level. I mean, when do people ask you as a Korean woman, what do you think about?
Yeah. They ask me things all the time, like, what do you think about this? Or why do Koreans do that? Why, I was asked once, why does Korean food smell so bad? Or, questions like that. And here's the thing. The way I will respond to a question about me or my ethnicity or my food even, it depends, like you said, both on my mood, who is asking it, and how they're asking it, and what it seems to be their intention. Right. So the question sometimes it's not just itself you look in isolation. You have to look at it sort of in the big picture of things. And I think for folks who are a little nervous about talking about race, they feel that's hard to navigate. It's not like a clear black or white rule, what I'm supposed to say, what I'm not supposed to say, what I can ask, what I can't ask. What I will say is this: if your intentions are pure, then 9 out of 10 times, I think that comes through to the recipient. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying 100%. I'm not saying that you might not have an awkward experience here or there, but 9 out of 10 times, I think it will come through. And when it does, it is such a positive and can be such a profound opportunity to have that kind of moment with somebody else, that don't let that one minority experience get in the way of all of the other positive ones. I have heard people say, I was scared to say something about how I support the Asian community because I thought it would sound fake or disingenuous coming from me as a white person. I think 90% of people who hear it will not take it that way. They will take it as, thank you for showing your support. When you talk about spreading hope and happiness, I was at a rally right after the Atlanta shootings here in Los Angeles. And I went out there and there were hundreds of people, and it included not only tons of Asian Americans, because it was a predominantly Chinese neighborhood that I was in, but there were so many Latinos and Blacks and whites. And at one point, people were chanting and they were saying, stop Asian hate, stop Asian hate. And then the person who started the chant kept switching and he'd say, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. And he'd go back and forth. And so what you saw in the audience were little old, Chinese grannies yelling Black Lives Matter. And then I noticed, a Latino family or a Black guy saying, stop Asian hate. And it was, to me, to see that was really profound. I mean, I had never seen something like that. I'd never seen a Black person call out and cry for supporting the Asian community like that when I was little. I didn't grow up with that. And so now it is a different moment in time, and we are seeing things like that. And I think that is such a promising opportunity for our country.
Yes, and what a beautiful visual that is. And I want to leave this interview with that beautiful visual, because it is really, that's the vision for our future. It is truly. Thank you so much. The last question I always ask: what or to who are you most grateful for? Connie, and thank you so much for coming back to the studio to really illuminate. I mean, everything you said is just gold for me, and I think it will help everyone who's like in that question space. How do I help? How do we move forward from this? So, gratitude. Who are you grateful to?
Right now, I'm really grateful for my team at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, who are working night and day on this issue. And they're not doing it because they make the big bucks in nonprofit, but they do it because they love what they do and they feel passionate about the work. And so I'm just right now very grateful for my team.
Oh, yes, I've had fun working with Elise. So
she's amazing.
Just shout out to her. But thank you so much. Bless you for all the work that you're doing. I'm giving you Dr. Marissa's Beneficial Presence on the Planet Award, and it's not something that I give to every guest. So let me just give you the applause that goes on. Is the latest recipient of Dr. Marissa's Beneficial Presence on the Planet. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marissa, for having me. I enjoyed the discussion.
Wonderful. All right. And we're at the end of the show, and I'm excited to show you a trailer for next week's festivities celebrating my 9-year anniversary on the air, on camera. And here is a little, oops.
What if conforming to the world was exploring the world? What if the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, little girl, turns into how many streets of life you want to explore? What if the purpose of life is not to die with the most toys to leave our squabbling relatives? What if the purpose of life was to do things that we enjoy most of the time, have relationships that we enjoy most of the time, and use our unique talents, gifts, and abilities to fully express in the dash between birth and death? What if, as a direct result of this horrible pandemic, we could rise out of the ashes with the new PPP, post-pandemic possibilities? The sooner you turn "it's impossible" to "I'm possible," the what ifs become possible too. Because you are loving, lovable, and loved, wrapped in a warm blanket of worthiness. But it may start with getting out of bed and making it. What if starts with
And we're back. I'm trying to close this out. All right. That is the trailer for my new baby, my labor of love. 4 months ago, I woke up with this idea of post-pandemic possibilities. So if you're, wanting to rush back into what back to normal that you were, please tune in next week to see about your possibilities and supporting this new short film that's coming out. I get to try to get into the film festival circuit, and the responses and the initial rushes have been really great. So I'm so grateful that you're going to come back and celebrate with me next week, Friday, drive time, prime time, 3 p.m. on KCAA AM 1050, FM 102.3 and FM 106.5. And y'all know I'm also on Spotify and Spreaker and Stitcher and T Live and Amazon Music. So plenty of ways. If you want to support the work that I'm doing, I have a couple of ways. One is if you shop on Amazon, please, and I know you do, go to Smile Amazon, just put in 8 Ways to Happiness. And every time you make a purchase, the price is the same, but a little bit goes to Amazon. As well, some of you know I have my new nonprofit, 501c, 8 Ways to Happiness, does donate books and programs to kids, teens, and adults, young adults, who have temporarily forgotten their birthright to happiness. So with a $25 donation, you get a copy of my Mommy What Are Feelings book, which was illustrated by my daughters when they were 3 and 5. So if you have kids, if you know some kids, if you're an organization that is serving kids and you'd like free copies of this book that has the taste, touch, sight, and sound of feelings, then please do reach out to me so I can put you on my distribution list as well, and you can support me. I do appreciate all of your support, all of the ways in which you have, in 9 years, I'm going to get emotional, all of the messages and all of the fingers, the likes, this finger, and all the numbers, and I'm just so grateful that my efforts to try to balance out all the bad news on the air has been so appreciated. And I continue to ask you to share, ask you to like, ask you to subscribe, because this is my job. You're part of my Happy 88 mission. 88 million more happy people in the next 8 years. You know, I was on tour with 8 Ways to Happiness, and the Asian Oprah giveaway today for anyone who is watching this is to go to my website, www.drmarissa.life, and there, put on the pop-up Asian Oprah giveaway, and you will get a free audiobook copy of my #1 bestseller, 8 Ways to Happiness, from wherever you are. Not because I'm selling the book. Well, I am selling the book, but part proceeds go to Habitat for Humanity, thanks to my New York publishers, Morgan James. Also because I promise if you do all the exercises in the book, you will never hate yourself the same way again. Because hurt people. And we are at a time right now that if you are one of the 7 out of 10 of us who've been hurt in your childhood trauma, like I was, it's time to quit dragging that hurt now, because we've got work to do. Hurt people are fundamentally one of a kind, wonderful, who are chiseled into a place where we can extraordinarily help other people in a way that others can't. So I am collecting people who know what it means to have pain in life, to remember that pain in life is mandatory, but suffering is optional. So please do the work. Please join my Happy 88 mission. Please go to drmarissa.life, be in the number, start your good life habits if you haven't already. Join the 21-day fast from complaining with Dr. Marissa, which is an activity that will change your life if you don't like reading. So just not complaining for exactly 21 consecutive days in a row will definitely help you with that start. I am Dr. Marissa, broadcasting from my living room, thanks to the pandemic, wishing you the best week ever. Remember, It's all about balance. Peace in, peace out. World peace through inner peace. And don't forget to tune in on Mondays at 10 a.m. when I do my live interactive broadcast where I can answer questions. That's Mind Your Own Business with Dr. Marissa every Monday at 10 on Facebook, YouTube, 10:30 on Doc Balance on Instagram. Almost forgot to say that. Love you all. Have the best week ever.
Well, she has been dubbed the Asian Oprah, and she just wants all of us to be happy.
Dr. Marissa, aka the Asian Oprah, says the most important thing you can choose is choosing to be happy.
You are tuned into my weekly talk radio TV show called Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced with Dr. Marissa.
That's the idea for Dr. Marissa Pay's new book called 8 Ways to Be Happy.
Many of us say, I am my own worst critic. Nobody's harder on me than I am. And my response to that is, stop it! Why are you doing that to yourself? You have to be your biggest fan, because if you can't at the end of the day say, I did a good job, who is? We don't have to constantly be angry at the things that are wrong. Why don't we choose to be happy about things that are right? We have the choice. That's our muscle. And life is so amazing if we can see it.